Welcome to Town Talk, the official podcast of Summerville, South Carolina, where we bring you the latest news and guests with people who make our town special. I'm Chris McIntosh, the town's PIO and the host of Town Talk. And today I am very excited to have Councilman McIntosh with us. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Chris. Good to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to meet with me and just have a conversation. So,
absolutely.
Let's start at the beginning, right? What brought you to Summerville, or were you born here? Kind of what's your story with Summerville?
Well, the answer to what brought me, or who brought me to Summerville, is my parents.
Yeah.
I was a year old. It was 1967, and my dad took a job as a dean of students at what is now Trident Technical College.
Okay.
And I think they looked around a little bit west of the Ashley, and they looked at Mount Pleasant because my grandparents were living in Mount Pleasant at the time, and they chose Summerville. So we moved to Summerville, as I said, in 1967. It truly was a small town, really still a village. There was 3,000 or so people here.
That's crazy.
So for at least a good 6 months, if not a year, we were the new family in town.
Okay. So there was that short time there. So from my research, your parents were educators, correct?
That is correct.
So what was that like, having parents being educators? How did that help you kind of grow up and set you up for your career and your life?
Well, obviously, if you devote your life and your livelihood to education, you're a public servant, and you have that mindset of service, and I think that has impacted me, my entire life.
Yeah.
I'm a practicing attorney in private practice. I do it for the, among other things, I do it for the money, but I have served 5 years as a prosecutor, and really looking back on now 25 years in the practice of law, of which I've spent 5 as a prosecutor, and now about 12 and a half on town council. It would be I think the practice of law would be a rather hollow experience if it did not have a public service component to it.
That's good. That's good. That's a really good message. And you brought up your career, and I kind of want to dig into that a little bit. Did you go to college?
I did.
All right, where'd you go to college?
Okay.
Let's start there.
Well, let's start with kindergarten.
All right, kindergarten.
Went to Mrs. Canarin's kindergarten on Sumter Avenue in Summerville.
Okay.
And Summerville Elementary. To give you an idea how small the Summerville area was in 1972, 73, when I was in the first grade at Summerville Elementary, there were 3 elementary schools in District 2.
Okay.
There was Knightsville, which is a very small little school for the Knightsville community. There was Givans, I think an even smaller school for the Givans community. And every other first and second grader in District 2, all the way down to Ashley Phosphate Road, went to Summerville Elementary. That's how small it was. And but went to Summerville Elementary and Span, but I didn't finish the Summerville High School, and went to Clemson. My undergraduate studies were at Clemson. After that, I worked for a little while, but decided to go to graduate school. Went to got a master's in public administration. At one point, I thought that I might want to work full time for a municipality or county and local government. But so I got my master's in public administration from the College of Charleston. But by the time I was finishing that up, I really kind of gravitated back to something that I always really thought that I would want to do, and that would be to go to law school and seek a profession as a lawyer.
Nice. So you, most of your career was spent as a lawyer, correct?
This is my 25th year.
25th year. So
I went to law school at 29. I got a master's degree. I worked several different jobs, just enough to motivate me to do what I always said I was going to do, which was go to law school.
Yeah, hey, I love that you had a goal and mission set in your head and you did it. Now, practicing law, did you always practice law in this area?
I have. I started out just out of law school with student loan debts and a young and growing family, and so my first work as a lawyer, I was at a downtown Charleston firm, representing corporations mostly through insurance carriers mostly. It was very steady pay, and benefits and that sort of thing. So that was but it also was very time consuming and had a fair amount of travel involved in it. At some point, I decided that by the time that my second child was born, that I really wanted to be present in my kids' lives, and that just chasing the almighty dollar and chasing down flights and airports was not really what I wanted to do. So after practicing law for about 6 years in private practice, I kind of took a turn and joined the First Circuit Solicitor's Office and prosecuted cases right here in Dorchester County for 5 years.
Okay, and that opened up your time to be, be more around your family and kids, right?
Absolutely.
And
it went to 70 or 80 hours a week to maybe 40, 45.
That's a huge change.
Yes.
That's a huge change. Now, when it comes to being a father, how has that, obviously it influenced you to change your, trajectory in your career, but how has being a father really helped you build to be where you're at today?
Well, as I approached my role on town council, it has certainly impacted that, being a father. It actually impacted my decision to return to Somerville. I graduated from Somerville in 1984, and even though I'd lived in the Carolinas ever since, I had not lived in Somerville. My folks lived here, still live here, in a house that I moved into as a 4 or 5-year-old. But I really thought that I lived on Isle of Palms, I'd lived on Folly Beach, I'd lived in downtown Charleston, and just really wasn't, Somerville was home, but I wasn't really thinking about living in Somerville until I became a parent. And when I became a parent, I started thinking about my childhood, just a very idyllic childhood growing up in Somerville, and going to Somerville schools, attending Somerville churches. I knew almost immediately that that's what I wanted for my kids. And so when we moved back, New Year's Eve, 1999, we ushered in the millennium a little bit different than Prince apparently thought we should in his song. We moved all afternoon and evening, had a 18-month-old and another child on the way. Yeah. And I was actually asleep by about 10:30 that night. That's how I ushered in the millennium. But have lived in Somerville ever since. Yeah. For my second time in Somerville has been since December 31, 1999, and it was intentional, and it was because it's where I wanted my children to be raised and to grow up and to really form their values.
And I feel like that's why a lot of people, including myself, moved or live in this area, is because it is, when you look at our surrounding areas, it's growing, and I think that's not a surprise to anyone in the Low Country, in whatever town or city you live in, it's growing. But here in Somerville, it's just different because you have aspects that are family oriented, and that's the reason why I, myself have moved my family here, because that it has that aspect to it. And whether people think it's a blessing or a curse, I mean, we were ranked in the top 50 Fortune's list, and for best places to live for families.
Right.
And which I think is ironic for this conversation, because it is a family-oriented town, and the people here are just so welcoming compared to other places I've been involved in, and I'm still young. I still got many places I need to go and visit in my life, but I mean, I'm sure you can attest to that a little bit more.
Well, our family was certainly very warmly welcomed into this community back in 1967. And even though we've gone from about 3,000 people in town in 1970 to a little over 50,000 in 2020, I think that we have preserved a lot of what is truly distinctive about Somerville. It certainly has been a struggle at times, and that's not just preserving historic houses or historic buildings. That's part of it, but I tell people there is a Somerville way, and what really makes Somerville unique and distinctive is not the beautiful parks, not the beautiful historic houses, but the people. We've been weathering a storm, if you will, of residential development. A lot of it outside of our town limits, but very much impacts our standard of living, traffic, congestion, for example, but congested schools for another. But Somerville has clung to its distinctiveness, its charm, and we still more or less do things the Somerville way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's noticeable. And to circle back a little bit on something you just brought up, in almost every conversation I've had, at least with a council member, we talked about traffic, and that's usually top of the list of issues that we're facing here in town. Do you want to address that a little bit, but also if there's any other, I would say, issues here in town that you would feel are of importance?
Sure. Job one for Somerville town government is public safety. I chair the public safety committee. It's probably some would probably say that serving as Mayor Pro Tem, which I did for a couple years, would be the highest rank you could have on council other than to be the mayor, who is a member of council. But I tend to disagree. I think chairing the Public Safety Committee is probably the highest rank a councilperson can aspire to on council, because it really is why we're here. Mm-hmm. And we have phenomenal fire and police departments. We're blessed with incredible leadership from Chief Doug Wright, and we just finished, a decade or slightly more than a decade of really inspired leadership from Chief Richard Waring. So that's always going to be job one for Somerville government, for Somerville Town Council. Having said that, traffic, I kind of alluded to it earlier. A lot of our traffic issues are not of our doing, but they sure do affect our quality of life. They affect the ability of our merchants to succeed. They affect our ability to get to work, to enjoy life, enjoy our leisure time, and two major projects, probably more than two coming down the pipeline, will, I think, address a lot of the really heavy congestion that we have in the middle of town, and that is the final leg of the Berlin G. Myers Parkway and its extension of North Maple Street from the new exit at 197 to out towards the Knightsville area. A lot of the folks that will be using the Berlin G. Myers Expressway and the last leg of the expressway and using the North Maple extension out to Parsons Road, the vast majority of those folks do not live in the town of Somerville, but they live south or southwest of the town in unincorporated Dorchester County, but they work in Charleston. And they have to get to I-26. They have to get home from I-26, and they have to get to I-26 in the morning to get to work. Dorchester Road and Highway 61 can only take so much traffic. So, these projects, while the town, for example, is not paying a dime on the Berlin G. Myers Parkway, it was really two mayors, Bill Collins and Ricky Waring, who really spearheaded the effort to get finally the Army Corps of Engineers to approve the project, because it had been just it had just been lagging out there with very little attention, and probably was never going to get built without those two mayors. And so while it's not a town project, most of it is not in the town limits, and most of the people that will use it are not town residents. It will dramatically change the traffic patterns on particularly North Main Street. And in the next 4 years, I think it will be about 4 years roughly before it's open. The Berlin G. Myers is open. I think North Maple will finish first. After those projects are online, those blocks of North Main Street, from the railroad tracks up to the Berlin G. Myers Parkway, are going to be transformed. Those businesses there now are designed for automobile traffic. They have huge parking lots. They depend on automotive, the traffic, motor vehicle traffic to get customers to their stores. It's 4-laned, at least 4 lanes. Some with turn lanes, it's more. Our vision, I think this is a pretty uniform vision on town council, is a vision that those blocks are going to need help. They're going to lose a lot of traffic count. And I think we are all committed, and I think we have the funding in place now to really pay attention to North Main Street from the railroad tracks. It will start, let's say, railroad tracks to Highway 78. I think eventually we'll need to focus all the way out to the Berlin G. Myers Parkway. And that means real sidewalks. It means burying overhead utilities. And at some point it will mean actually taking it back down to 2 lanes like South Main Street. And that's going to, it may take 3 years, it may take 5 years, it may take more to get out to the Berlin G. Myers, but what that opportunity for us is that we have the opportunity to lengthen and stretch out what's really one block of Main Street that is our historic downtown, and make it 5 or 6 blocks. And I think that the council as a whole, and I think really each member of council is committed to that vision, because sitting around and doing nothing really won't be an option once all of that traffic is taken off of Main Street.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it'll be very interesting to just watch how everything transitions and grows, but also just enhances, and having the traffic being enhanced and eased up a bit is something I think a lot of people are looking forward to.
I think they are. I do think I know they are. But what has happened in the last decade or so that I've been on council is that one block of South Main Street, plus add the block of Short Central, the block of West Richardson, connecting them, is that our downtown, what little downtown area we really have, has just sprung to life. 10 years ago, if you could drive down South Main, across the railroad tracks towards Town Hall at 9 o'clock in the evening on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and 90% of the businesses would be closed. Even a handful of restaurants or kind of hospitality businesses would be closing up. Plenty of parking spaces, and that's dramatically changed in 10 years. And it doesn't have to be a Friday night at 9 o'clock. It can be a Tuesday at 5 or 6, where it's really hard to find a parking space around town square, and it's very easy to see why, because the shops and restaurants and establishments are literally people are spilling out of them at 6 and 7 and 8 in the evening on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and that's been a remarkable change in just the last 5 to 10 years.
And that only speaks on the quality of businesses we have here in town too, because I know many people who travel from downtown Charleston, West Ashley, Mount Pleasant to come to places here in Somerville, and that's to the community and their businesses and their creative thinking on maybe some of their, if it's a restaurant, some of their menu items and the chefs that they bring in. It's just the quality of the businesses we have here is awesome.
There's no question that is part of it, and what we have to do as you know, I'm a limited government guy.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of things that I think government does well. I am thrilled that we do an exceptional job with public safety, for example, and we don't want private citizens as a police force, and we've had a fire department here actually longer than we've had Dorchester County. Our Somerville Fire Department's older than Dorchester County, so I'm very proud of what we do well, but most things the private sector does better, and we always need to realize that and remember that and not try to replace the private sector. But having said that, there are things that we can do to attract entrepreneurship, to foster entrepreneurship, and people like Brad Mallett at Coastal Coffee Roasters and other folks who have Oak Road Brewery, the people that have seen the potential of Somerville and kind of got in the ground floor of what's happened in the last decade. They've done well and we've done well, and it's been a great partnership. But the thing that I hear when I'm at Third Thursday or at the farmers market or at other events, the Friday events that our Parks Department puts on in Hutchinson Square, what I hear from folks, most of whom do not live in town, is that there is something about our little one to 3 block, depending on how you count, downtown historic district. There's a charm, there's an authenticity to it that just attracts people.
Yep.
And folks who live out in Cane Bay, they have a Somerville address, but my gosh, they have to drive through the city limits of Goose Creek for 5-10 miles just to get to our town limits. They consider our town square their town square. And some of that obviously is the quality of the businesses that do business around town square, but another big part of it is that what we've done as a community, both in town council and citizen activists, is we realized that we had something real. We had something that everybody else wants, which is a real life town square and an authentic historic downtown. And we've preserved it, we've promoted it, and we've improved it. I'm known as, I think it's fair to say, I'm known as the most fiscally conservative member of council. When the vote came up, we planned and planned and planned for Hutchinson Square for years, but as we were planning, the cost kept going up and up and up, and that final vote, I believe it was around $3 million. I mean, that's a pretty small little piece of grass to spend $3 million on, and it was I wasn't the only one that was kind of gulping hard at the time we voted to do it. I think it was a unanimous vote, but there were at least a couple other people, certainly Councilman Walter Bailey, and I think it was Mayor Wiley Johnson at the time. We knew we had to do it, but it was a hard vote in the sense that it was a lot of money, but it has paid off dramatically. The new and improved Hutchinson Square is a magnet for people, and that has helped all of our businesses within walking distance of Town Square, and that's what we thought was going to happen. That's what we were pretty darn sure was going to happen. But when you're about to cast that vote to spend $3 million on a little bit of grass, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, boy, if this doesn't work, the voters are going to toss us right out. But thankfully, it did work.
I think, you brought up, it's funny you say that, but I think it's also a good lesson for our listeners is to understand that, our council members really do take every consideration possible, and, being very thoughtful about the decisions and thinking about every aspect, playing devil's advocate on different topics, different ideas, and being a diverse council is huge, because then you can really kind of communicate and really talk about both sides of the idea and figure out a solution, right?
Right.
And so I think
well, one of the things about our council, the people on it, but also the way that we were set up, and when home rule came down and the legislature finally allowed municipalities and counties to actually have some authority, that didn't really happen until the mid-1970s. And so he created 3 different types of government for local government, and at the time Mayor Berlin Myers had just become mayor. He wasn't elected mayor, he was a member of council, he was mayor pro tem, and the mayor in office passed away, and he had the choice of having a referendum to choose your form of government, or to have council state which form of government was closest to how it had always been done.
Yeah.
And what newly promoted Mayor Myers decided, and the council serving then, was that they weren't going to have a referendum, that they had always functioned in their mind close to what became the council form of government.
Yep.
And that's been, we've had a referendum as recently as 2016. Some folks would like to have a strong mayor. Some people would like to have a manager form where the staff kind of runs the whole show and the mayor and council just kind of vote on a budget. But that was not what Mayor Myers and the council that was in place in the early 70s had been doing. And so they kind of chose this form of government, this strong council form of government for us. And it's challenging. It's definitely challenging, but it's certainly more time consuming for council members than if you were in either of the other 2 forms. But when it works well, and it doesn't always work well, but when it works well, what it does is it forces all 7 of us, including the mayor, to work and strive towards consensus. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's not all that pretty. Mm-hmm. Try to keep the ugly part off the TV news and out of the council meetings, but that striving for consensus can be messy. But boy, when you get there, and we have gotten there on issues, mm-hmm. Hutchinson Square revitalization being one of it. It took a year or more to get all 7 council members on board. Yeah. But when we pulled the trigger on it, there was no stopping us.
Yeah, and I think it's just really, I guess it's admirable to hear that aspect, and a lot of people might not understand the differences between those forms of government, of local government, and I think it's just really admirable to hear. It feels like Somerville to have a group of council members plus mayor being able to just talk and hash it out, right? And listen and communicate, and it forces communication, right?
If you're not communicating, this form of government will not work.
Yeah.
It will naturally, nature abhors a vacuum, and it will naturally start morphing into one of the other 2 forms of government, where either the mayor is in charge or a manager is in charge. And that's all fine and good, and it works in other municipalities. City of Charleston works pretty well as a strong mayor. City of Greenville works very well, in my opinion, as a manager form. But the distinction is that those communities, those cities have chosen mm-hmm. that path. And we did have a referendum in 2016 that would have allowed us to go to a strong mayor, and our voters turned it down. And so in a sense now, since 2016, the voters have spoken. They want us to hash it out. They don't want us to create a vacuum by not communicating and by not working together.
Yeah, no, I love that. And to kind of pull back a little bit, just talking about town council, and that's kind of the topic we've been on, but I just want to pick your brain a little bit. What motivated you to get involved within town council? I know you've always kind of had that career of service, but what really motivated you to take that step?
You know, like you said, I had somebody approach me 4 years previous to when I did run. I ran 2011. I had someone approach me in 2007 about running, and I had only been at that time working as a prosecutor, as an assistant solicitor for about 2 years, and I knew that if I ran and got elected to town council, I would have to give up my position as an assistant solicitor. It would be dual office holding, and so I just wasn't ready to do that. I was like, no, I'm really enjoying, being a prosecutor. I tell people, and I mean it, if it wasn't for raising 2 daughters and putting them through college, I might still be a prosecutor today, but there just came a time where I had to make a little bit more money than what the government was able to pay. But I truly enjoyed being a prosecutor. I was having a blast back in 2007, so I declined when folks approached me about running for town council. But I really started thinking about it. I started thinking about, wow, these specific people have think that I would be good at it, asked me to consider it. It was the wrong time for me, but over that 4 years, I kept coming back to, what can I do, and how could I contribute? And there was some division on council during that time. I came into office at the same time as a brand new mayor, the first new mayor in 40 years, replacing Mayor Myers, and it was Mayor Collins. And in those days, the mayor appointed the committees and appointed the chair. And we've changed that now, but Mayor Collins asked me to come see me in his office, and wanted to go see him. He says, I want to appoint you to the Planning and Economic Development Committee. I said, okay, that's fine, wherever you want me, Mr. Mayor. And I'm like starting to get out of my chair, and he says, well, something else I want to tell you is I want you to be the chairman of that committee. And of course, that's where all the hot button issues go, rezonings, annexations, developments. So I just kind of looked at Bill Collins and I said, what did I do to you? I mean, why would you're putting a target on my back? But I did chair that committee for really off and on for about 10 years. And, I think folks would say that I was, treated folks, the applicants and citizens very fairly, and really tried to find that middle ground where property rights were certainly protected, but that we were moving any whether it was commercial or residential development with a strong preference for commercial development over residential, that we were moving in a direction that was still preserving the uniqueness, distinctiveness, and charm of Somerville.
Yeah, and you what, to kind of talk about your committee, I guess, council career, you went to, what was it called again? It was the
development, planning and economic development.
There it is. Now you were currently the chairman of the Public Safety Committee. When did that transition happen, and what happened?
Well, I told folks the last 2019 election. Every time we have a new election, council now selects their own committees based on seniority, really, and then the committees elect their own chairs. And I had served on the Public Safety Committee for a while, but I had not chaired it, and I think that my experience as both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, kind of gave me a unique perspective on public safety, and I did have a very, very close relationship with a number of people in Somerville Police Department when I was a prosecutor. Prosecuted a lot of cases with then Corporal and Sergeant Doug Wright. Now that he's now Chief Doug Wright, but after off and on a decade of chairing that Planning and Economic Development Committee and kind of sitting on the hot seat a little bit as we tried to work our way through often, very emotionally charged and controversial matters, I was ready to let that go.
Yeah.
And I had not intended to chair any committee really the last 2 years, but after the elections were over and the 2021 elections were over, and Councilman Touchberry joined us after the retirement of Councilman Bailey. We selected our committees. I got public safety because I had a little bit of seniority, and I got my choice of committees. But I was very surprised one evening to get a call from Councilman Aaron Brown. Councilman Brown had been chairing public safety for about as long as I had been chairing Planning and Economic Development, and Aaron and I have been friends a long time, since before either one of us were on town council, even, or certainly before I was on town council, but I think even before he was on council. So I got this call from Councilman Brown one evening, had no idea what it was about, and he said, "I've been thinking about it, and I really think you ought to chair public safety. I've done it long enough, I guess." And it was an honor that he would step down for me to do it, because it really is. It's the backbone of town government. More than half of our employees work for police, fire, dispatch. Almost half of our $45 million operating budget is devoted to police, fire, and dispatch, and it's frankly the reason that people are willing to come into town and pay an extra level of taxes, is they get an extra level of law enforcement and public safety protection. Yeah,
absolutely. And speaking now that we kind of got your history and kind of your background of your time on council, I'm just curious for you, what are some of your, let's think future, what are some of your hopes and dreams for the town of Somerville?
Well, withstanding the pressures of development, what I would really call an onslaught of residential development, that's never going to cease.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no way to be no growth. There is a way to be no growth, zero growth. You can go to Northern California in the west and northern San Francisco Bay Area, and they figured out no growth. It can be done, but you can have a one-bedroom apartment essentially at $1 million. And because that's what happens if you don't allow any new residential development in an area where there's demand. If you completely cause the supply to evaporate in an area where there's great demand, people end up paying $1 million for a one-bedroom apartment.
Yep.
And So the pressures are going to be there. What council has to do, what the town staff has to do, is figure out a way to direct, manage growth that preserves our distinctiveness, preserves our charm, and frankly focuses more on commercial development over residential, but makes sure that we're not causing a San Francisco Bay type situation where the only people that get to enjoy our charm and distinctiveness are literally millionaires.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. But I think we have incredible people here in town, incredible people on council. I think the community can feel comfortable knowing that we got the people here to keep our charm, because everyone that I've crossed paths with, me personally, whether it's in the office or just the community itself, loves Somerville. That's the one thing we all have in common.
It's the tie that binds us.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's not a question, at least for me. To kind of bring this train home a little bit, I know listeners are familiar with this question now. I ask every guest this question, and I want to ask you. Top 3 places to eat here in Somerville.
Oh, wow. There's so many good ones. One of my favorites right now is just outside of the town limits. It really ought to be in the town limits, but I don't know if I'm going to say their name or not, since they're, I do try to, as much as possible, patronize businesses that are in town, as opposed to those that have, whether it's their choice or their landlord's choice, have chosen to kind of be in one of our unincorporated donut holes. But 3 that I just can't not name. Oscars is just a standard.
Yeah.
It's been here since '82. My good friend Mark Deach and Nancy Deach, they owned it for years, and it now has a second ownership. But they really, the new owners have really done a good job, kind of maintaining that kind of OG Somerville vibe that is Oscars. But gosh, we got so many new restaurants opening up that are phenomenal. I've never had a bad meal at Bexley.
Okay,
Bexley is phenomenal, and I won't say the person who told me, who I had this conversation with, but he probably had let himself go even further than I have, just a little bit. But we were talking about Bexley one night and what phenomenal food they had there. But it is kind of a date night thing. You might you have to save your pennies a little bit to go there, and the portions aren't huge. And I said to this fella, I said, I love the food at Bexley. I'll put up against anywhere in Charleston, maybe anywhere in the state. I said, but I always go out there with my wallet a little bit lighter, and not completely always full feeling. And he looked at me and he kind of did this and he said, that happens to me all the time, everywhere I go, all the time. But no, Bexley, so I tease Jeremy and them about that sometimes, the pricing and the portions, but the food is absolutely phenomenal. For a third, there's so many. I'm gonna do 4. La Rustica is fantastic, and Miles and June is pretty fantastic too. And there are a couple of really, really good restaurants within about a quarter mile of the town limits. Some of them may be completely surrounded by the town limits, but I just can't. I can't do it. I will eat there, but I'm not gonna hype them.
Well, it's true. The food scene in the Low Country is great, but Somerville, you can't beat it. And obviously, it's gotten me too. But one last question, and then we'll go our separate ways. I wanted to do the food as the last question, but this just came up to me. I figured it'd be good to get your thoughts on. For the community our listeners and anyone who's just interested, what are some, in your opinion, some of the best ways our community members can get involved within the town, the council, and anything of such?
Well, you know, there are lots of ways to get involved in town, and there are plenty of great nonprofits that need volunteers. I mean, I just off the top of my head, the Public Works Arts Center, the Somerville Museum, the Flowertown Players, they all need and will use volunteers, but and I'm sure I'm leaving plenty out, but as far as getting involved in town government, what I would just implore people to do is watch the meetings. Mm-hmm. If you can't get to the meetings, you should come. It's different. I've watched them through Zoom. I participated in them through Zoom, but it's streaming is not the same.
Yeah.
Come to the meetings if you can, but watch them streaming if you can't. And I think if you watch enough, I don't know whether it would take 3 months worth, 4 months worth, I think you will see that there's a place for civic involvement. Whenever I get a letter, an email usually, or phone call from a constituent or somebody that lives in a different district, my first and last thing I say to them, even if they're kind of beating me up a little bit, angry about something, but the first and last thing that I say to them in my response email is usually something along the lines of, thank you for your civic involvement. Mm. And, you know, even though for the first time since I've been on council in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had highly contested appointments for our boards and commissions, mm-hmm. the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Adjustments, you know, the Design Review Board, yep. 3, Board of Architectural Review, did I say them? Yep. So 4 pretty big ones there, and there are others. In the past, we were just looking for people, like, you know, but wonder if they'll do it, wonder if they'll do it. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had situations where I've encouraged people to apply, you know, and they didn't get it. And they were great candidates, they were very qualified, but we actually had 3 or 4 great, very qualified applicants. This is new. Yeah. This was brand new. And it's a good sign. It's a healthy sign, yep. that folks want to get involved. But, you know, that has been my response to people, and me imploring people that if you think you might ever have any interest in possibly doing what I've been doing for 12 years now, and, you know, throwing your hat in the political arena, running for office, you know, test drive one of our citizens committees, serve a term on the Planning Commission, get your feet wet, and it's a really, really important way to serve.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. But you know, Councilman McIntosh, I'm sure we could talk all day, but I just want to appreciate your time coming on and talking with me, and I hope we could do this again.
It's been a pleasure, Chris.
Sometime
Thank
soon.
you for having me.
Thank you so much.